السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أنا عمر ليث، سنة ثانية كلية الطب، واليوم راح أشرح عن ال Respiratory Development. طبعا راح أسوي فيديوهين. هذا الفيديو الأول I'll focus on the larynx, trachea and the lungs. ال part 2 video it will talk about the diaphragm and the anomalies. طبعا I got the information, most of the information from Langman's Medical Embryology. It's a very useful book. I suggest you read. أول شيء when we hear the word embryology, أي واحد من عندنا يسمع كلمة embryology يتوقع إنه الموضوع صعب ومعقد وصعب إنه يعني يفوت بالدماغ. بس trust me, if you understand the concept it will be very easy. شغلة إحنا اللي نسويها الغلط إنه بس نحفظ. لما نحفظ يومين 3 أيام راح نبدأ ننسى المعلومات، أما لما نفهم الكونسبت المعلومات راح تبقى بدماغنا. I will prove this by the end of the video. First of all, I'll start by doing a recap of the embryological development. During week 3, there is an important process that happens to the embryo. This process is called gastrulation, which the bilaminar germ disc becomes trilaminar, 3 layers. As you can see here, if you remember the primitive streak, appearance of the primitive streak and the migration of the cells into that primitive streak, بالأخير راح يصير عندنا 3 layers: ectoderm, mesoderm and endoderm. زين، فوق الectoderm this is طبعا هاي الكروس section. Okay, this is a superior view, this is a cross section. فوق الectoderm عندنا الامنيوتيك sac. Under the endoderm we have the yolk sac. راح يصير بهذا الشكل. عندنا هذا الازرق هو الectoderm، الاحمر هو الميزوديرم، و in the axis of the body what develops is the notochord, and we have the endoderm, the innermost layer. هسه الميزوديرم it undergoes differentiation where it differentiates into 3 things. First one, the paraxial mesoderm اللي هو هذا, and the intermediate mesoderm و lateral plate mesoderm. معلومات كلها أخذناها بالyear 1. Lateral plate mesoderm it differentiates into visceral and parietal, or splanchnic and somatic. هسه what follows the gastrulation process is folding, if you remember, and we have 2 types of folding. We have the lateral folding, which is showed from this picture. لاحظوا the 2 edges they join together at the midline مثل ما موضح، ويصير عندنا هذا الشكل بالأخير. لاحظوا إحنا there is like a tube right here. This is called the primitive gut. This is very important for the development of the respiratory system. This primitive gut, it has layers. The inner layer is the endoderm, and the outer layer, the red part, is the mesoderm, particularly the visceral mesoderm or the splanchnic mesoderm, also plays a role in the respiratory development. وعندنا هذا neural tube. This is the anteroposterior folding. We said there are 2 types of folding, lateral and anteroposterior. This is the sagittal view of the embryo, like a lateral one. مثل ما تلاحظون الcranial part والcaudal part they fold inward just like this, bringing the structures in front of the neural tube, ومن ضمنها الهارت واللungs. طبعا a lateral view of the embryo in 25 days and 28 days. مثل ما تلاحظون الشغلة اللي نريد نركز عليها إنه prox or cranial part of the primitive gut becomes something called the pharyngeal arches. Pharyngeal arches, these are very important in the development of the respiratory system. تمام؟ زين، هسه خلصنا من الريكاب. Let's move into the development. Basically, this is a lateral view or a sagittal view of the primitive tube and the pharyngeal arches. نبدأ هسه بالprimitive tube. It divides into 3 parts. most proximal or most cranial is the foregut. In the middle we have the midgut, and distally we have the hindgut. We'll focus on the foregut only. بالنسبة للpharyngeal arches, which is at the cranial portion of the primitive tube, there are 5 pharyngeal arches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. You may ask, what happened to 5? 5, it develops initially, but it regresses, leaving us with 4 and 6. Okay? تمام. هسه lower respiratory tract, what does it consist of? It consists of the larynx, trachea, bronchi, and lungs. نجي هسه على larynx, the first one. Larynx, it arises from the 4th and 6th pharyngeal arches. And as you can see here, both the pharyngeal arches and the primitive tube, it has 2 layers, an inner layer which is the endoderm and an outer layer which is the mesoderm. تمام؟ هسه larynx, as I said, rises from the endoderm and the mesoderm. The endoderm gives rise to the epithelial lining of the larynx. Makes sense, the mucosa. The mesoderm, it gives rise to the muscles, the cartilages, the connective tissue of the larynx, which we will discuss later. هاي بالنسبة للlarynx. The remaining parts of the lower respiratory tract اللي هما الtrachea والbronchi والlungs directly arises from the foregut, from the primitive tube. ونفس الكلام, الendoderm give rise to the epithelial lining, تمام؟ والsplanchnic mesoderm or the visceral mesoderm gives rise to the cartilages, muscles, particularly اللي هما smooth muscles طبعا, والconnective tissue مال these parts. نجي هسه initiation of the development of the respiratory system. كل هاي الحكاية تبدأ من appearance of the laryngotracheal groove. On the ventral surface, this is a sagittal view of the primitive gut. On the ventral surface, right here بالضبط, يصير عندنا groove. This groove is called laryngotracheal groove. Now, what happens next is that cells, endodermal and mesodermal cells, start getting into that groove. Okay? يعني هي تروح بهذا الاتجاه. This will cause something called budding. Budding. Something will bud from the primitive tube. فشي راح يطلع من الprimitive tube. على مود أقرب الصورة. The laryngotracheal groove will become the laryngotracheal diverticulum. It has bud off the primitive tube. طلعت من الprimitive tube. بس مثل ما تشوفون هنا, it is still attached to the primitive tube. So if we take like a cross section at this area, هذا الجزء خلينا ننساه. If we take a cross section and we look from that side anteriorly and laterally, راح يصير عندنا هذا الشكل مثل ما تلاحظون. In A we have the respiratory diverticulum or the laryngotracheal diverticulum. What forms هي tracheoesophageal ridge. This part will soon become the trachea. This part will soon become the esophagus اللي هو primitive tube. بيناتهم what will form is a ridge. Now this ridge مثل ما تلاحظون بالصورة بي, it will start to deepen. شوية شوية there is an opening between the trachea and the esophagus, soon to be trachea and esophagus. This cavity will close. Eventually it will form something called the tracheoesophageal septum. This tracheoesophageal septum will separate the respiratory diverticulum from the primitive tube. فبالتالي اللي صار بالضبط هو انه primitive tube has given a rise to the trachea and the other structures and the esophagus. Trachea anteriorly, esophagus posteriorly, مثل ما موضحها بهذا الشكل. فصارت عندنا بهذا الشكل as you can see here laryngotracheal diverticulum which will soon become the trachea and the lower respiratory tracts lungs وهالسوالف. It has separated from the primitive tube. لاحظوا صار اكو هنا space بيناتهم by the tracheoesophageal septum. الريسبيراتوري دايفرتيكولم طلعت من البريميتيف تيوب، فمثل هذا الشكل الموضح. زين، هسه شغله كلش مهمه انه laryngotracheal diverticulum is separated from the primitive tube by this part right here. فتخيلوا انه انتو داخل الpharyngeal arches right here and you are looking towards this direction. What will you see? You will see this. اللي راح يصير هو formation of an orifice, of an opening right here مثل ما تلاحظون T-shaped opening that will connect the primitive tube to the laryngotracheal diverticulum. تمام? And this orifice will widens as you can see here. فصارت بهذا الشكل، صار اكو opening between the primitive tube and the laryngotracheal diverticulum. This is called the laryngeal orifice. الشغلة الثانية انه cells around this laryngotracheal orifice will form swellings. Superior to the orifice راح يصير عندنا epiglottal swelling. تمام؟ و inferiorly we will have the arytenoid swelling. بس احنا نريد نركز على epiglottal swelling that will develop into the epiglottis. مثل ما تشوفون هنا we have the laryngeal orifice and the epiglottis cranially or superiorly. Then what was the function of the epiglottis? Epiglottis, it blocks the pathway towards the respiratory system during swallowing. So it makes sense انه هي موجودة هنا like right here. تمام؟ And another point that is worth mentioning in اللي يصير انه some of the endodermal cells، خلينا نشرح على هاي الرسمة. Some of the endodermal cells will travel in the laryngeal orifice and will form vocal cords. مثل ما تلاحظون هنا صار عندنا vocal cords right here which is inside the glottis. Yeah, we have the glottis, we have the epiglottis, and this is the separation between the respiratory system right here and the digestive system أو primitive tube مثل ما موضح هنا. Now let's compare what we have here to a normal adult. كله نفس الشيء، يعني سبحان الله all of the features that are present in the adults is present in the uterine life but with some modification. عندنا هنا لاحظوا الtrachea which is the respiratory tract arises from the laryngotracheal diverticulum. عندنا الesophagus which is basically the foregut, the primitive tube. We have the glottis right here مثل ما تلاحظون. This is the glottis that contains the vocal cords اللي هو هذا. And we have the epiglottis right here that guards the larynx اللي هي هنا. Yeah, literally the exact same thing. So it's very important to understand the picture. I hope I made it easy for you. This is a fully mature larynx. Just to show its parts, we have the epiglottis superiorly, which is the guard. We have the cartilages. We have the thyroid cartilage, cricoid cartilage, arytenoid cartilage, cuneiform cartilage, and all of them arise from the mesoderm. الابيثيليال لاين قلنا من وين يطلع؟ قلنا يطلع من الاندوديرم. تمام؟ and we have the vocal cords مثل ما موضحة هنا. this is for the larynx. نجي هسه على النيرف سبلاي. النيرف سبلاي my larynx is the vagus nerve, branches of the vagus nerve. It is very important to note that احنا شنو قلنا انه larynx it arises from the 4th and 6th pharyngeal arches. All of the structures that are arise from the 4th laryngeal arch are supplied by the superior laryngeal nerve, which is a branch from the vagus nerve. All of the structures that arise from the 6th pharyngeal arch are supplied by the recurrent laryngeal nerves اللي هم right or left. We took them in the anatomy of the mediastinum. Now, what are the structures that, for example, arise from the 4th pharyngeal arch? عندنا thyroid cartilage from the 4th. The rest of the cartilages, like for example arytenoid, cuneiform, الشباب الثانيين, they arise from the 6th pharyngeal arch. خلصنا هسه larynx. نجي هسه على what's left for the lower respiratory tract اللي هم التراكيا والbronchial tree والlungs. هسه عندنا احنا laryngotracheal diverticulum. This is cranial, this is caudal. The cranial part of the diverticulum develops into the trachea, which makes sense. The distal part develops into the lung bud. Lung bud, it branches into 2 bronchial buds. Then we have series of branches, different stages that I will discuss shortly. بالأخير رح يصير عندنا this beautiful bronchial tree as you can see here. These are the stages of the maturation of the lung. We have 4 stages. We just need to know what happens in each stage. First of all, we have the pseudoglandular period from 5th to 16th week. طبعا تختلف من كتاب لكتاب. مثلا بالإستعداد مكتوبة من 7 إلى 17 أسبوع. it's just important to put it in mind. اللي يصير بالpseudoglandular period is the development of the conducting zone. اللي هم شنو؟ البرونكاي, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, bronchioles with terminal bronchioles, only the conducting parts. مثل ما تلاحظين continue to form the terminal bronchioles. No respiratory bronchioles or alveoli are yet present. هاي بعدين تصير. The next stage we have the canalicular period from week 16 till week 26. بهذه السtage we will have the development of the respiratory bronchioles and the alveolar duct. مثل ما تلاحظون each terminal bronchiole divides into 2 or more respiratory bronchioles and also will develop into the alveolar ducts. Alveolar sacs بعد, it doesn't develop in that period. And during that canalicular period, vascularization increases a lot in the lungs. The third period, which is the terminal sac period or the saccular period, from week 26 till birth. In this stage, we have the formation of the primitive alveoli. بس primitive alveoli, they start all cuboidal cells. Then it will develop into type 1 and type 2 pneumocytes. أكيد تعرفون بهذا الشيء. In the end, we have the alveolar period. Subhanallah, it extends beyond birth. The primitive alveoli undergoes many processes من عندها development of septa, يعني increase in the number of alveoli, increase in the number of respiratory bronchioles, وهالأشياء, the capillaries increases, and at the end we have this beautiful tree. Trachea divides into the main bronchi, primary bronchi, one in each lung. Then the primary bronchi will divide into secondary bronchi or lobar bronchi. Each one will go to its lobe. Then the secondary bronchi will divide into segmental bronchi or tertiary bronchi. بعدين عندنا subsegmental. بالأخير عندنا bronchioles. بعدين نجي للتيرمينال bronchioles. بعدين respiratory bronchioles إلى آخره. أتمنى هذا الفيديو ساعدكم. واي سؤال انت تريدوه احنا حاضرين، وان شاء الله قريبا راح ننزل part 2 regarding the development of the diaphragm and the anomalies of the respiratory system, congenital one of course. Thank you so much for listening and I wish you good luck.